Namaste. Assalamu alaikum.
This is what Bernie Sanders said about the situation going on in Venezuela, the attempted coup d'etat by the United States government in Venezuela. Bernie Sanders said on Thursday, so 5-6 days ago, the Maduro government in Venezuela has been waging a violent crackdown on Venezuelan civil society, violated the Constitution by dissolving the National Assembly, which is not true, and was re-elected last year in an election that many observers said was fraudulent. Further, the economy is a disaster and millions are migrating. That's true. 3 million have immigrated out of Venezuela so far. The United States should support the rule of law, fair elections, and self-determination for the Venezuelan people. We must condemn the use of violence against unarmed protesters and the suppression of dissent. However, we must learn the lessons of the past and not be in the business of regime change or supporting coups, as we have in Chile, Guatemala, Brazil, and the Dominican Republic, and Venezuela. In 2002, we've already coup d'etat them once, or attempted to take Hugo Chavez out for 2 days. The United States has a long history of inappropriately intervening in Latin America countries. We must not go down that road again. So, Bernie forgot the Venezuelan 2002 Venezuelan coup in his little list there. He also said that they had, Maduro had violated the Constitution by dissolving the National Assembly. It was only temporarily dissolved. It was dissolved by the Constituent Assembly. The Supreme Court held it up. There were protests, and then the Supreme Court invalidated it, undid it. So then it only lasted for a day. So violated the Constitution would have been the Constituent Assembly, which is made up of 360 people. Twice as many people are in the Constituent Assembly than is in the National Assembly. And that's what this whole thing comes down to. It comes down to two legislative bodies, a Constituent Assembly and a National Assembly, of which Juan Guaido is the leader of the National Assembly. And the Constituent Assembly, I'm not for sure who's in charge of it, because it was popularly elected. They had elections, people ran, there's 360 people waiting to write a constitution.
What I will say for now is it's great that the three major presidential candidates, Elizabeth Warren, Tulsi Gabbard, and Julian Castro, they all support Medicare for all, and they're, of course, the first three to announce their candidacy. So it's making the standard in the Democratic Party one that you have to support Medicare for all to be taken seriously. We'll see if the other candidates follow suit, like if the establishment types, Biden, even Hillary Clinton, if they decide to run, we'll see if they adopt that position too. That's very good. And then from there, we can decide who is the most progressive, who is the best candidate. But having that as a starting point, that's major.
This is what Tulsi Gabbard declared Thursday on Twitter. The United States needs to stay out of Venezuela. Let the Venezuelan people determine their future. We don't want other countries to choose our leaders, so we have to stop trying to choose theirs. And that's a play on the Russia thing. We don't want Russia to intervene into our politics, and yet we're going to go dive nose deep into Venezuela.
All right, so should the U.S. overhaul its policy on Syria based on what you just saw? A new bill has been introduced in Congress that would make it illegal for the U.S. to arm or assist the extremist groups in any way. The bill's author is Democratic Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. She claims U.S.-backed rebel groups in Syria are assisting terror groups like al-Qaeda, and they're using our money to do it. Congresswoman Gabbard joins us now. Congresswoman, always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks, Chris. Aloha.
Have not had the chance to speak to you since you met with President-elect's transition team. Of course, these decisions will be in his hands once he assumes office in just a few weeks. What is your feeling about the direction our policy will take?
And then everybody else, I mean, Ro Khanna came out against it, and they're all getting a bunch of pushback. But Kamala Harris didn't say shit. She don't have moral clarity when it comes to matters of war and peace. Kirsten Gillibrand, she don't have clear vision of war and peace. Elizabeth Warren, I would have thought that she might have said something. Sherrod Brown, Cory Booker, but Kamala Harris has addressed the nation. Everybody's getting excited. The DNC has already anointed her. The mainstream media, they're the ones that say that we need to stay in Syria forever, and then they're the ones that say that Tulsi is anti-gay, pro-Assad, both of which are wrong. And then the mainstream media, God, they got a lot of shit wrong recently. The MAGA boys, they were, that Nick Sandmann just stood there proud and was silent and didn't react, which was intelligent and smart and nonviolent. He's got a right to peacefully assemble. He's got a right to speak. He's got a right to not speak. He doesn't have a duty to retreat. He just stood there. He said if the guy wanted to get by, he would have let him go by. So Kamala Harris, the DNC champion, where are you in Venezuela? Huh? Do you have a clear foreign policy? Do you have a good sense of ethics and morality when it comes to foreign policy? Because that's, a $1 trillion question right there.
Well, this is exactly why I accepted the invitation to meet with President-elect Trump, was to speak very directly about the situation in Syria and to call on him to do what I have been talking about in Congress now for years, and that is to end the illegal, counterproductive regime change war that we have been fueling along with countries like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Qatar by pouring money and weapons and intelligence and other support to these groups that are directly working with groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, groups that we are supposed to be trying to fight and to defeat.
Aren't you guys sick and tired of these trillion-dollar, forever endless wars? Aren't you tired of spending trillions and trillions of dollars for every bomb, every dollar we spend on a bomb? That's not a dollar we're spending on the American people. How many countries are we bombing right now? 6, 7? Can you even name them all? America, can you name all the countries that your government is bombing in your name? It's pretty pathetic, America. It's Libya, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Sudan, Somalia, and Niger. We are bombing 7 countries right now. We're also ignoring a genocide in Myanmar. The Rohingya Muslims, 6,700 have been killed, 1 million has been displaced, and the Yemeni people. We are covering Saudi Arabia's ass right now while they kill tens of thousands of Yemeni people.
But what might surprise people and what really makes me angry and curdles my blood is that the U.S. government has been violating this law by directly using American taxpayer dollars to support allies, partners, people coordinating with and working with groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS by providing money and weapons and intelligence and other support in their fight to overthrow the Syrian government.
Recently, I just read that 15 homeless folks, first death in Chicago recently. That's that's a Christian nation, right? That's our homelessness policy. People put it on the national government, the state, the local. Nobody's doing anything about it. Somebody's got to do something about it. The local, the state, or the feds have to do something. Right now, our homelessness policy is c'est la fucking vie. Let the veterans, adults, children freeze to death on the street. If they can't find a place to live, that's their problem. Donald's leading this Christian nation. Christians love Donald. He's probably an atheist, right? Sitting there fooling all these Christians. He's talking about the Bible, something about putting the Bible class, or isn't adultery punishable by stoning according to the Bible? And Christianity, oh my goodness. I'm equal opportunity religious offender, so ask me about the other religions if you want. But Christianity is a belief without evidence that God sacrificed God to save God's creation from the wrath of God. And it worked. It was perfect. I mean, when you sacrifice God to save God's creation from God, He loves it. God then forgave God's creation after God's creation murdered God. Oh my fucking God, goddamn Jesus, fucking Christ. The noble soul has reverence for itself. The noble soul has reverence for itself.
Syria has not declared war against the U.S. or threatened the U.S. The launch of 59 missiles against Syria by Trump last year was illegal and did not meet any of those criteria in the War Powers Resolution.
The great homeland does not submit. It stands proud with the love of its nations, united in Alba. We are all Venezuela, Latin America, and the Caribbean, the cradle of great and luminous beings, demands dignity and greatness against the empire. Nicaragua.
I don't agree with Tulsi Gabbard's position on that issue. On gay marriage, you might say, well, hold on, all these candidates are for gay marriage. That's true. Tulsi Gabbard is currently for gay marriage like all the other candidates so far, but she used to be anti-gay. She actually called activists for gay marriage, quote, homosexual extremists multiple times. And even though they've all arrived at what are very similar positions today, I would still find relevant that she at any point, although good for her that she changed her mind, used this language about people who said, hey, we should be able to get married as well.
So all the president's men are sitting there saying that all the options are on the table. This is how fucking sloppy these guys are. All the options are on the table. So what, we got 5,000, a million nukes? So we're going to drop 1,000 nukes on Venezuela? That's an option that's still on the table. Dropping 1,000 nuclear weapons on Venezuela and wiping them out forever and ever, still on the table. Jesus fucking Christ, all options are on the table. Venezuela don't even have nuclear weapons. Do they even have weapons of mass destruction? There's no genocide. They pose no threat to us whatsoever unless we invade them. We just stole $7 billion from them, which I'll get to in a different video. By them saying that all options are on the table, all options are on the table. All options are on the table. Every single thing you could think of, possibly. These fucking clowns, these goddamn they can't even walk without tripping over themselves, and we're going to let them conduct a war on Venezuela without congressional authority, without the American people weighing in on this? They're just pulling a slow-motion coup d'etat right in the front of the world's eyes, in front of our eyes, too. They haven't attacked us. They're not genociding their own people. They're not pulling the shit the United States government is doing in Yemen. You want to talk about some fucking bullshit? Genocide is a reason to intervene. So Venezuela isn't doing that bullshit. But the Myanmar is. We don't give a shit about the Myanmar people, right? Come on, give me a fucking break. Donald Trump just cut all the food stamps for the last month and a half for all the poor kids. So no lunches for the kids, no food for the American people. Bread and circuses is how the Romans pacify the Roman people. Bread, so give them a little bit of bread so they can sustain themselves and then entertain them with circuses. But our Roman Emperor, our Jan Führer, he's not even in favor of letting us eat. So you're going to sit there and tell me that you give a shit about the starving kids in Venezuela, and that's why we got to invade? No, this is for oil. This is for empire. This is for the oil corporations to make fucking bank. This is about Venezuela being a socialist country. This has nothing to do with American security. This is going to create terrorism. This is going to make things worse. Venezuela does not pose a threat to us now, but if we invade, they have a right to defend themselves.
Syria has not declared war against the U.S. or threatened the U.S. The launch of 59 missiles against Syria by Trump last year was illegal and did not meet any of those criteria in the War Powers Resolution.
So, yeah, shit, all the options are still left on the table, right? But I guess, is that just the default position? What about Canada? We still got all the options left on the table for them. What if Russia and China are being ran by communists? Are we just going to let that happen? How about Mexico? How about Michigan? Are all the options still left on the table for everybody in the world? So a president who gains power by a violent coup d'etat can be taken out by a violent coup d'etat. It sets a piss poor precedent. You're the president who got installed by a foreign military power. So that means when the foreign military power wants to depose of you, you can't say shit, right? Because you went ahead and, your presidency is legitimate. So the president who gains power by a violent coup d'etat can be taken out by a violent coup d'etat. You got to elect the person. You got to elect the president. That's the only way Venezuela is going to get Juan Guaido to be president. He wasn't even elected by the people. He wasn't ever voted on for a presidential election. He got 26% of the vote to become a member of the parliament, but that's it. And then he's leading the parliament. So they call it president of the parliament, but that doesn't make him president of the world. He's only president of one branch, which is going to be dissolved by the brand new Constitution that Constituent Assembly is writing. And that's the primary issues between the National Assembly and the Constituent Assembly. And there's more people in the Constituent Assembly, and the Constituent Assembly are darker. They are more, I don't want to say black, but browner. And the National Assembly is lighter. So there's more white people in the National Assembly, and there's more brown folks in the Constituent Assembly. And guess which side the United States is going to be on, with the whites or the browns? The National Assembly, we're with the whites. Our government is with the whites.
Yeah, look, on the campaign trail, I believe Trump said that he would reinstate Glass-Steagall, yet we've seen a recent executive order asking Treasury for a plan on how to deregulate Wall Street. So I'm very concerned about this, because this is...
So, if you topple a government by violent coup d'etat, you have no moral or ethical or legal authority. Only a president riding on a revolutionary wave can achieve that pinnacle. Has Juan Guaido talked about the revolution? Is this a revolutionary, change? Because if it's not, then it's just straight up warmongering, war machine, might is right, by the right of conquest, whoever wins this war. So typically, peaceful and fair and equal elections are what is needed. That's a U.S. institution, 4-year elections here, and it's kept the peace here for the most part. Now, a lot of people keep saying, well, the opposition boycotted the election. So that's Juan Guaido's argument. So last year, you had Maduro who ran an election, but the opposition boycotted the election. So what a bunch of idiots. You had an election, and instead of running in that election, you said, oh, I'm not going to run in this election. And now a bunch of Maduro got elected. The opposition missed an opportunity during the presidential election. You should have found your one candidate, your one opposition figure, and then you all should have went out and voted for that opposition figure. If there is violence at the polls, if there is violence at the election box, that's when there's some bullshit going on with the elections. So boycotts don't work. Boycotts don't work, so don't do them. Unless there's military men at the voter booths forcing you to vote for their guy, just face the poll workers. Don't be scared. Don't get intimidated. Confront them. Mobilize. Get your people out to vote. Voting is revolutionary as fuck. So compare and contrast. We don't, most Americans boycott most American elections. Democracy is not sacred in this country. Most Americans don't give a shit about democracy. Most Americans don't vote in our own elections, so that's the very least you could do in a democratic government, to vote. That's why we only have Maine, who's got instant runoff voting. Maine is the only state in the United States that has a fair election system. Apparently, the rest of the states are too goddamn afraid of the Libertarians and the Green Party. So Donald won the presidency, but he lost the popular vote, right? So he actually lost the presidency by 3 million votes, but we got the Electoral College, so, he wins. But don't forget that he lost. He got 3 million less votes. Hillary got more American votes than Donald did. The turnout rate was 46%. Most Americans did not vote in the last presidential election, and the presidential election is when most Americans go out to vote. So if Americans aren't voting for the president, they're not voting for their mayors and their comptrollers and their secretary of states. Democracy is not sacred in America. So for us to have a moral superiority and say that third democracy isn't working right, you can make an argument that half of America boycotts American elections. The majority of American people boycott American elections because the majority of the American people don't give a shit about this democracy, or they don't think it's representing them, or they don't think it's working, or they're boycotting it because who gives a damn? It's not like your one vote's going to change anything.
I've introduced legislation to end this counterproductive, illegal regime change war. This bill seeks to stop the funding that is fueling that war, again, both by directly supporting these terrorist groups or the money that's being used to funnel weapons and other assistance through countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey, who are also working towards overthrowing this government for interests that serve them, but that do not serve the interests of the American people.
So real fast, I just want to talk about what I believe is going on. The National Assembly is the current legislature, and it's made of 165 elected Venezuelan citizens. The Constituent Assembly is made up of about 350 or so elected Venezuelans. So you got two bodies. One's the Congress, and then the other one is the Constitutional Convention. The Constituent Assembly is writing a brand new constitution so that they will have a referendum, and if the Venezuelan people want that brand new constitution, then they will vote for it. Once the new constitution passes the referendum, if they vote for it, then the National Assembly, just like the Continental Congress in our early American history, the Continental Congress, under the Articles of Confederation, was dissolved in exchange for the brand new government that the Constitutional Convention gave birth to. So that's what's going on in Venezuela. This new Constituent Assembly, because Maduro, the president, right, so George Washington, called for this election. They voted for the 350 so Venezuelans to write a brand new constitution. The National Assembly is feeling that they're going to get dissolved, which they could, but that doesn't make them irrelevant. They could institute the elections, and they run the country for the next 2 years until the new government gets into office. So they're the transitional government. They're the government they're the legislators, so they're the law writers.
Representative, if I can ask you real quick, why do you suppose it's taken so long here for legislation like this to come through? I mean, we've been funneling weapons and training and intelligence support to the Levant Front and Fursan al-Ha and Jabhat Fateh al-Shalom for quite a while now. And, of course, al-Qaeda and ISIS, a big conversation piece for a lot of our military spending. And yet,
now, some people say that Maduro is a dictator. Well, shit. Donald Trump went ahead and stole $7 billion from Venezuela by executive order. He's been signing executive orders left and right because let's just let the president run by decree. Whatever his opinion is, let's just say that's law. If he changes it the next day, who gives a shit, right? The president has unlimited war powers because Congress ceded that authority to him, and he writes out executive orders because apparently some dumbasses follow that shit as if that's real law. It's not real law. It's got the color of law, and it's supposed to fill in the gaps where there are gaps in the law. But our president has taken the law-writing power because people actually listen to that. So he's a dictator. He's a dictator by his executive orders. He's a dictator by him being a war president. He could suspend habeas corpus just like Abraham Lincoln did and start arresting state governments and local governments and mayors and governors. You could, under the war power, suspending habeas corpus, emergency power, and then he's got all those executive orders. So the situation in Venezuela is just like how the beginning of American history was. For 13 years, we didn't have the U.S. Constitution. We had the Articles of Confederation. The Continental Congress gets dissolved, and then the brand new government of George Washington, the first president, he's president for 8 years after the Constitutional Convention, writes up the brand new Constitution, and all the states, or the majority of the states, voted in favor of it.
I can tell you with certitude today is I will not be supporting Tulsi Gabbard over Elizabeth Warren, okay?
Now, Jill Stein, she points out that it's all about the oil. Again, is this a big fucking surprise? It's about the oil in Iraq. It's one of the biggest, oil fields out there that the United States does not control. So John Bolton, they're being very cavalier about this. They want to take the oil. They want to take Venezuela's oil. It's a socialist country, and they're making capitalist America look dumb, apparently, which I don't think so. I think that we can coexist, both socialist and capitalist, and we can have a synthesis in between the two, which is what America's been doing for 70 years now anyways. So John Bolton said that we're in conversation with the major oil companies right now. John Bolton, he was a war criminal with the Iraq war, I believe. People have been calling him a war criminal. He said it would make a difference if we could have American companies produce the oil in Venezuela. We both have a lot at stake here. So he's sitting there saying the U.S. government is in bed with the oil companies, and the oil companies are looking to go into Venezuela so we could take their oil. We could steal their oil, as if the Venezuelan people don't know that their oil is their own.
There are many identity games to be played here. Tulsi Gabbard, the first Hindu member of Congress, would be the first Hindu president. She's the first American Samoan member of Congress. would be the first Samoan president.
Nancy Pelosi is for the Venezuelan intervention. Nancy Pelosi, right? The hero of the shutdown. She needs to get back to work so she can invade Venezuela. Nancy Pelosi calls herself a capitalist. Nancy Pelosi hasn't done shit about the war on drugs, nor declared a war on poverty. There's a war in the streets. There's a war in the Middle East. There's no war on poverty, but they have a war on drugs so the police can bother me. It's Tupac, 1995, 24 years ago. Jill Stein also points out that Elliot Abrams, this is Donald's point man on Venezuela. When Donald says, hey guys, what's going on in Venezuela? You get this Elliot Abrams comes up. Oh, who the fuck is Elliot Abrams? Well, Elliot Abrams backed death squads in Latin America that killed thousands for right-wing dictators. So he's carrying on the same tradition of which killed Jacqueline and Felix's family. He lied to Congress to cover up Iran-Contra. Iran-Contra failed because the government investigated, the press covered it, and then nobody followed through. Nobody followed through with the investigation, no arrest, nothing happened. So all that criminal activity with the Iran-Contra and Elliot Abrams helped to cover it up. And guess what else Elliot Abrams helped the U.S. government do? In 2002, he helped the U.S. attempt a coup. We actually were successful for 2 days. Hugo Chavez was not the president for 2 days in Venezuela. So Elliot Abrams has already conducted a coup in Venezuela, and Elliot Abrams is the man that our president is listening to.
Groups. This is a war against terrorists who've declared war on America, and it's a war that we must win. The second is the counterproductive war to overthrow the government of Assad, an illegal war that Congress has not authorized and which must end.
Last but not least, I'm going to talk about Bill Maher. Bill Maher is all for the Venezuelan coup. He's this warmongering son of a... So he's not upset that we're going to overthrow a sovereign nation who hasn't attacked us, nor do they pose any threat to us whatsoever. There's no genocide. They're not gassing the Kurds. There's no uranium coming up through Africa. There's none of this other fucking bullshit that we're constantly fed, a bunch of dead babies in incubators. Nothing like that is going on in Venezuela. They had a downturn in the economy, so the food is more expensive and there's more hardship. But this is an internal political matter. This is an internal political matter. It does not rise to the level of U.S. intervention. Myanmar requires U.S. intervention. Yemen requires not even U.S. intervention, just for the United Nations to tell their, their allies, according to Lindsey Graham, Saudi Arabia, hey, Saudi Arabia, could you not genocide Yemen? Could you not do that? Just ask them. All the U.S. has to do is ask Saudi Arabia to stop, and they would do it. But Donald isn't going to talk to his. He's making money with the Saudi Arabians, right? He's been making money with the Saudi Arabians for quite some time. So Bill Maher, this Hillary Clinton stooge, this right-wing sellout, he's sitting there saying that he's pissed off, not about us intervening in a country we got no business intervening in, but he's pissed off that Russia says that we're not allowed to. Russia's made a statement, China, Mexico, a lot of countries have come out against this, but he's pissed off that Russia got some balls that said, you can't invade Venezuela, it's a sovereign nation, it's an international law you're breaking. Bill Maher says, this is the Monroe Doctrine, this is our backyard. Bill Maher's quoting Nixon, our backyard? South America is our front yard. Look how much bigger in the cold-ass Canada. That's our front yard. Canada is our front yard, and then this big-ass landmass is our backyard. Now, that's our front yard. That's our front yard, and if we would get referendums and adopt them as states, then we could drive all the way down to South America, just like people of Maine can drive all the way to Washington State.
Tulsi Gabbard also tweeted once, when we talk about conspiracy type stuff, that Turkey is a supporter of ISIS. That is simply not true. So,
Bill Maher is a racist, house slave piece of shit. Does he remember how much John McCain threatened Russia over Crimea, over Ukraine, over Georgia, over Chechnya? This Russia bullshit has got to fucking stop. It is insane. Every year, every time that the president is elected, there is a campaign to delegitimize his presidency. For George W. Bush, the Supreme Court selected him. For Barack Obama, he was born in Kenya. For Donald Trump, he's an agent of Russia. Every single fucking president, there's a delegitimization effort in the very beginning. That's just, politics. But the Democrats haven't gotten off this Russia bullshit for quite some time. The Mueller investigations have gone on for 2 goddamn years. Put up or shut up. We got to see what the hell you got. What the hell because he's killing Russia in Syria. Russia is threatening us, so that doesn't sound like that's our friend. Why would our friend be threatening us? Donald Trump is building up the border with NATO with a bunch of troops. So he is confronting Russia. He killed Russian mercenaries in Syria. I don't want the Cold War. The Cold War is over, you old-ass motherfuckers. Quit being so goddamn scared of Russia. Quit being so fucking scared. We didn't live through the Cold War. That dumb shit that don't move me.
Syria has not declared war against the U.S. or threatened the U.S. The launch of 59 missiles against Syria by Trump last year was illegal and did not meet any of those criteria in the War Powers Resolution.
So many times the United States has confronted Russia, and rightfully so. So Russia and the United States, before we used to have the Soviet Union, so there was a 2 superpower world, and we would check each other to make sure we weren't going past our boundaries. So Russia cannot, they took Crimea, right? They haven't taken Georgia or Chechnya yet. They tried to take Afghanistan. So don't underestimate these countries' imperialist ambitions, but that's the crime of Adolf Hitler. What did Hitler do in World War II? Why did we institute the United Nations? So one sovereign nation can't invade another sovereign nation. That's the reason we got the United Nations. That's the legacy of the greatest generation, the United Nations. I will see the United States war effort, because it's always selfish and it's always bullshit, to the United Nations. Get the entire world involved, then I'll listen. So if the entire world isn't sitting there saying that this country is doing it to this country, the United Nations has pointed out that there's a genocide in Myanmar. The United Nations says the thing about Yemen, something about Yemen, an ongoing or a near genocide. But that country is about to starve to death. So Bill Maher, get the fuck out of here, man. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You're mad that Russia says we can't intervene. According to international law, we can't intervene. They're just being a friend, just letting us know, hey, if you invade Venezuela, it's against the law. You're not allowed to do that. It's against American law. It's against congressional law. It's against international law. These motherfuckers are operating outside the rule of law. They act like the law can't even touch them. So stay the fuck out of Venezuela. There's no reason for us to go in Venezuela. Let the United Nations call for elections. It's an internal political matter. Get Argentina, get Brazil, get Bolivia. Let Bolivia run the elections, and let all of South America, get all of South America together and let them run the elections for a constitution. First, vote on that damn Constitution, because you don't know, are you doing the new Constitution or are you doing the old Constitution? And then, after you vote on the Constitution, then vote for presidential elections. Do one in June, do the next one in December. You'll have this matter taken care of by the year's end. If you're being serious, if you truly actually want to fix the situation in Venezuela. But it doesn't sound like the United States government, my government, wants to fix the situation. They want the oil companies to take over this socialist nation and to capitalize upon the oil fields, one of the last remaining oil fields. And I heard that 1/3 of all the gasoline we drive comes from Venezuela. So the biggest supporters of Venezuela are the Americans who put gasoline in their tanks, especially if you are at Valero or Citgo. If you get your gas from Citgo or Valero, then you are financing the Venezuelan government. You have been. But the U.S. government, because they're operating outside the rule of law, went ahead and stole $7 billion of the assets of Venezuela that are here in the United States.
The foreign policy of Tulsi Gabbard is extraordinarily concerning to me. She has appeared on Fox News to praise Vladimir Putin and criticize Barack Obama's foreign policy towards Putin, which was a sort of initial red flag. Tulsi Gabbard has praised Russian intervention in Syria. I'm against that. Okay, an example tweet from Tulsi Gabbard about that issue says, quote, Al-Qaeda attacked us on 9/11 and must be defeated. Obama won't bomb them in Syria. Putin did. Hashtag never forget 9/11. I do not support intervention in Syria to help Bashar al-Assad retain power, period. That's not my politics. Gabbard voted against condemning the human rights abuses and war crimes of Bashar al-Assad's regime. That's not anything that I identify as the left I can get behind. That's the sort of Leninist left that I've sometimes referred to. Elizabeth Warren's position on that issue, on the other hand, is President Obama was right to seek congressional approval. She would prefer us not be involved in Syria. She wants troops out, but she understands that the situation's complex, involving the Kurds and many other factions, and it's important to know why Trump made the decision to pull troops from Syria when he made it. I agree with that. That's basically my position. And lastly, her political action committee, Tulsi PAC, funds a lot of sort of centrist and more right-wing Democrats over progressive Democrats. So the way that money is allocated in that way is not in line with my politics. So